Well, hello and welcome to another year of the ClubLIFE podcast. I'm Darren Flynn. Well, while the start of the year can be a quiet time for many clubs after the busy Christmas rush, others are busier than ever. And that's certainly true of Club Sapphire down in Merimbula on the far south coast. It's their busiest trading period of the year as holiday makers flock to idyllic coastal destinations. Now, the CEO of Club Sapphire is Damien Foley, who this year notches up an impressive 20 years at the club. And Damien joins me on the line now. G'day, Damien.
G'day, Darren.
We'll get to your 20 years of service shortly, but let's start off with that summer holiday surge. How's it been going down in Merimbula this summer period?
Yeah, we've had a terrific start to the season. In fact, I can go back a little bit further. The first 6 months of this financial year have been strong. The holiday period around Christmas started really well. The fires and now heavy rain has put a bit of a dent in that, with a number of potential tourists deciding not to come to the area because of the situation that they're faced at home, or the fact that they'll come here and the weather won't be brilliant for a few days. But I can't complain. It's been a great start to the holiday season.
People who haven't been to Merimbula before may not realise, but you're heavily reliant on Victorian tourism, aren't you?
Absolutely, yeah. It was once thought to be the Gold Coast of or for Victoria back in the old days when caravanning was really the main form of holiday travel. I'd say in the vicinity of 2/3 of our tourism comes from Victoria.
It's a significant portion and a great part of the world, Merimbula. For those who haven't been there, get down there. I'm sure there's plenty of benefits, obviously, from being a town that has plenty of tourists coming in. But as a club manager, what are some of the challenges that come from that sort of tourist trade?
The biggest challenge is the seasonality of our business. So the Christmas period, our staff numbers would probably rise to around 120. In the middle of winter, when it's not so busy, they probably drop to 80-ish. So being able to attract and retain good employees through those peaks and troughs is probably our biggest challenge. The unpredictability of the season is also a big challenge, as we're seeing at the moment. We started, as I said, it started off the Christmas period with really good trade, and it's dipped now because of weather conditions, but that's the nature of where we live. So there's a lot of challenges, but it's also a beautiful place to live.
Attracting and retaining staff is a pretty common challenge, particularly for clubs in regional parts of New South Wales. You've had to be a little bit innovative in terms of your approach to attracting and retaining staff, including purchasing and leasing a couple of rental properties for staff. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that was an initiative that the club took on probably 2 years ago now, perhaps 2.5 years ago. We were really struggling to attract staff from outside the area. We rely on a number of our team to move to Merimbula for several months each year, and we were really struggling to attract those employees that we've in the past been able to rely on, largely because the vacancy rate in rentals here was just so low. So the club ended up buying a 4-bedroom unit just around the corner from the club. It's a 2-storey facility, but it's set up ideally for a number of staff. And then once that was full, we then had to look elsewhere, and we ended up leasing another 3-bedroom townhouse, and we've got staff in that as well. So providing that accommodation really did help us. But it's interesting, that was, as I say, about 2.5 years ago, and that solved our problem with sort of travellers that were coming to the area that would be happy to work here for 6 months who couldn't find accommodation. But it's sort of evolved a little bit to be more of an opportunity for some of our longer term staff who found themselves in a situation, whether it was a marriage breakup or whatever it might be, found themselves in a situation where they didn't have accommodation and perhaps needed to leave the area. And without rental histories, it's very difficult for people. So in one of those properties now, we've got longer term staff, some of our older team, and it's worked out really well. And it's helped us no end to attract and retain some of those key people that we need. We've done a variety of other things too, which are not unique. We've got a really significant, or the biggest gym in the area as part of the club facility here, and we offer heavily discounted gym membership, and there's a range of other benefits that we provide to staff that on a day-to-day basis give us a little bit of an edge over some of our competitors. We certainly can't take it for granted that we'll just advertise a job and there'll be applicants anymore. It's really a case of we've got to stand out from the crowd. We've got to give people a reason to need to work for us, and those initiatives have certainly helped.
We're going to talk in a little while about the impending milestone of 20 years in the club industry, but I want to go back to the beginning of your professional working life. because you started off in the horse racing industry.
Yeah, that's right. I have only worked in this industry for 20 years, or almost 20 years. Prior to that, I worked for more than 20 in the horse racing industry. I grew up in a horse racing family. My first full-time job was with the Australian Jockey Club at Randwick in the stewarding area. That's stipendiary stewarding and handicapping and race day judging. And I worked at Randwick for 10 years in a variety of different roles and absolutely loved it. I was a country kid and had a passion for horse racing, and the thought of working at Randwick was just a dream, really, to have that opportunity. That's what brought me from the country to the city. There wasn't really full-time roles in administration in racing in the country. You had to go to the city to be any chance to get one of those sort of roles. So I worked at Randwick for 10 years, and then when I finished up at Randwick, I was the manager of the handicapping department and went to Canberra to work for the Canberra Racing Club as their racing manager, and worked in that role for 12 months. And then I was very fortunate to be offered the position of CEO of the Canberra Racing Club. And I held that position for a bit over 9 years until I was attracted by the beautiful surrounds that I currently work in down here. So it was an interesting change. Some people call it a sea change, I suppose, but in my case, it was just a career change that was also in a beautiful location. I loved horse racing. I still have an interest in it. Still have a few shares in slow race horses. Some not so slow, but the majority are. But yeah, I still love that, and it's still my hobby, I suppose. But I really enjoy working in this industry as well.
You mentioned racing's in your blood. Tell us about your family's association with horse racing over the years.
Yeah, I grew up in a horse racing family. I had my grandfather, who passed away just before I was born. He was a horse trainer, amongst a whole range of other things. And my father shared his passion for racing, and he ended up being a race club secretary for many years. And in fact, as a kid, the front room in our home was the office of the Casino Jockey Club for many years. So I sort of grew up with it. And there's other family members who have a passion for it. My uncle, who recently passed away, used to ride track work for my grandfather, and also had a love of the industry. And it's interesting, I find with horse racing, and there's probably many industries like it, but those who are really passionate about it tend to have come from families where that passion was in their breeding, almost in their parents. So yeah, I was very fortunate to have that upbringing. And I think my first part-time job was when I was about 12 or 13. I was selling race books at the Casino Race Club or Casino Jockey Club for my father. So and I worked for bookmakers and a range of other roles before I actually ended up with a full-time role in racing.
Tell us a bit more about your dad, if you don't mind, because in many respects he defied the odds right throughout his life. Can you tell us a bit more about your father?
Yeah, absolutely. I consider my dad to be the most successful bloke I've met, and people might argue against that. But the reason why I say it is that, and Dad passed away more than 10 years ago now, he defied the odds from the start. He was born very premature in the late 40s, born with cerebral palsy, and they lived on a farm, and he was his mum, or my grandmother, was thrown in the cattle truck and driven to the hospital in Casino when she went into labour early, but didn't quite make it. So he was born on the side of a road in a cattle truck, very premature, and cerebral palsy was just another challenge he had to deal with. But when they finally got to hospital, my grandmother used to tell the story that the doctors said to her, go home and leave him, he won't make the night, won't see the night out. But she refused to accept that and took him home with her and fed him with an eye dropper for 6 months. And anyway, he survived. He was absolute character in the town where I lived in. He was if anyone needed an MC for the family function, they always asked Pat Foley to do that. He sort of had challenges through school as well. He was, I think when he was about 14, the careers advisor said to him, you'll never hold down a full-time job because of his challenges he had with cerebral palsy. But he ended up married and held down 3 jobs at the same time, 3 part-time jobs to feed his family. And I think that was well over a 38-hour week when you had the 3 together. He ended up having 5 kids and 7 grandkids. So for a fella that wasn't meant to live the first night or see the first night out, wasn't meant to have a full-time job, for mine, he was as successful as you could be. He used to be one of the kindest, most gentle men that I knew, and he always sort of instilled in me, I suppose, that you can't solve everything, but you just do the best with what you've got. And I think he was a good example of that. But yeah, I'm very proud of my dad, and miss him every day.
It's an amazing story. What lessons have you taken away from growing up with your father?
It's really a sort of a battler's story, I suppose. And just because someone says you can't do it, that doesn't mean that you can't. You can do almost anything within reason if you put your mind to it. And it's funny when you consider he was physically affected on one side of his body and carried a limp most of his life, or all of his life. But he never let that hold him back, even in sporting pursuits. He never played sport at any great level, but I always remember being frustrated as a kid trying to get him out in backyard cricket. You just couldn't get him out. I think he'd sort of found a way to bat with his challenges that just made him almost impossible to bowl out. But, I think that tenacity, that never give up sort of attitude that he showed is something that I'd like to think I've got a little bit of it. I don't think I'll ever be as good as he was at that sort of pursuit. I suppose the other thing I took from him was, this is who I am, take me or leave me. And, when we'd go to a family wedding or something and Dad would be the MC and he'd have the room in laughter, and in stitches. And it's just the way he was. This is how I am, and, take me or leave me. And it was a good example of, perfection might not come in the way you're born or the skills you're given or the things that you get naturally, but it might come in your tenacity or how hard you try or the never give up spirit. And it was probably there from the day he was born.
So after 20 years, Damien, in the horse racing industry, you've taken a huge step and moved into the club industry in Merimbula, beautiful town on the far south coast, but a huge move for you. I mean, obviously you grew up in a totally different part of the state. You then lived in Sydney and Canberra for a while. You've moved down almost to the Victorian border. What lured you into that position, the CEO's role at the old Merimbula Imlay Bowling Club, now Club Sapphire?
Yeah, it was a little bit by chance. A lot of the people who live in that Canberra area see Bateman's Bay as the automatic destination they go to for their summer holidays. But for some reason, I became aware of Merimbula when I first moved to Canberra, and my family and I used to come here for the occasional holiday and absolutely loved it. It's just the beauty of this area is it's still very natural. It's developing like, every coastal area is, but it's still very undeveloped and clean, and it's a real family destination, and that's probably what attracted me down here initially. And I ended up making it a fairly regular holiday destination and bought a holiday unit down here. And I was sort of at the crossroads in horse racing. I had progressed reasonably well in that industry, and I'd applied for and offered the job of CEO of the Queensland Turf Club, which was they raced at Eagle Farm in Brisbane at that time. And I looked at that job and I thought, if I continue down that path, I'm typecast, I'm going to be in racing forever. And I loved it, but I also wanted to test myself outside that industry. So down here on holidays one particular week or whatever it would have been, I'm lying on the beach at Mitchie's Jetty, which is a real family-friendly beach in Merimbula, reading the local paper and saw this job advertised. And I'd never really thought about the club industry, but I thought, well, it's got some similarities. They're membership-based organisations. They rely heavily on gambling as their major form of income, and run by the board of that's elected from the membership, and a whole range of other similarities. And I thought, I should have a look at that. And I applied and surprised myself by getting it, and ended up thinking, well, let's just give it a shot. And I originally came here thinking that I wouldn't be here for too many years. I might move back into racing or try something else. But after a few years here, I just couldn't leave the place. It's such a beautiful place to live and a great club to work for.
And probably a big part of the reason why you've been there for 2 decades, or close to 2 decades now, is your relationship with your board. Tell us about the board's vision and culture and why you love working with them so much.
It's a wonderful board. It's and it has been almost the whole time I've been here. It's been a really strong, cohesive, robust board. And given the circumstances or the criteria to be a board member, that's not an easy achievement. I think that we've got about 10,000 members, roughly 200 bowling members. And whilst all members are entitled to stand for the board, traditionally the bowling members take up most of those seats. And so we've got a board of 7. They're all bowling members and all have a range of different business backgrounds. And the culture of the board that's, I think, basically been there from the start is a culture that I think is a really strong boardroom sort of style, where they encourage debate, they encourage people to have a different opinion, but almost always work through whatever the issue is to find some common ground, and after robust debate, generally find a consensus. And it's good to work for in that regard. But also, like, they have a genuine desire to do the right thing by the community, and that might sound a bit straight out of the textbook, but it genuinely is the case. And I've seen many decisions where it's a borderline which way to go, but ultimately whatever is the best outcome for the community is the one that they'll generally take. And along those lines, this board and the previous directors that were on this board have a genuine desire to diversify this business to reduce reliance on gambling. And whilst we totally recognise it's a legitimate and really important part of what we do here, and it's a key part of our business model, the board really has been positioning this club for many years now to, as best we can, have less reliance on that form of income. And that's probably what has inspired me the most to stay here. A lot of my time these days is spent around the development of the club's vacant land assets. And I think the genuine desire to do the right thing and the genuine appreciation that everyone's entitled to a different view, and it doesn't mean that you need to defend yourself. It's just a case of, okay, let's consider what everyone thinks and get to a position that works for everyone. That creates an environment that's good to work for.
It's a great culture to have, and I know diversification's been a big focus for the board and for yourself. There's been some challenges, no doubt, along the way, and also some successes. Tell us about the diversification journey for Club Sapphire.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. Many years ago, previous boards acquired land around the club when this area wasn't such a built-up area as it is today. So the club has quite a large amount of vacant land assets, but a lot of that was challenged in that it was close to a creek that was flood-prone, and it needed a lot of work to get to a position where you could genuinely aspire to develop the land and make money out of it. Several years ago, we were right place, right time. The block of land next to us was bought by a developer who built a Woolworths on that site. But one of the conditions of consent for that development was that they had to bring their delivery trucks through the rear of the property and not into Main Street. So the only way to do that was to pass through club-owned land. So it put us in a really strong position to negotiate an outcome that led to all of that land between the club and the creek being subdivided, rezoned, filled and serviced by a road and sewer, water, power, etc., putting the club in a really strong position to be a future developer. So there's 4 vacant blocks. One of those blocks is currently under construction. We've struck a deal with the Super Retail Group to build a BCF and Super Cheap Auto on some of that land, and that's meant to be opened by 1 July this year. And some of the other blocks have had DAs approved. One block has a residential DA approval for the construction of 40 residential units, and we've listed that for sale, and the board has only recently accepted an offer on that. I think something will be built, whether it's residential units or some other form of development on that site in coming years. 2 of the other blocks of land that we have had approval for filling, which would raise them up above that flood level. It's a long-term strategy, and the development of each site is sort of parlaying us into the next one. It's been a really interesting journey, many council and state approvals required to get to where we're at, many deals done with various parties. So it's been an exciting, challenging and rewarding journey. But the end game for the club is all of this development is largely about eventually funding the construction of a hotel, 4.5 star is the vision at the moment, 100-room hotel on top of the existing clubhouse. And we've had state planning approval for the increase in height that's required for that development to go ahead. It's a very expensive project, but if we're successful, which we will be with the development of these other blocks, it will eventually put us in a position where we can then move on to that project. So the end game with all of that is to create new revenue streams that allow us to be less reliant on some of the more traditional income streams that the club relies on.
It's transformative stuff for the club, there's no doubt about that. To what extent would you say that the diversification projects have been the thing that's kept you at the club? Is that fair to say, rather than just running the club itself? Is it the ability to, be involved in these projects which will change the face of the club? Is that what's kept you there so long?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the challenge around that is really what inspires me to come to work most days. I love what this club does for the community. That's also keeps me here too, but the prospect of being involved in that exciting evolution of the business model of this club and allowing it to continue to do what it does so well for the community, but perhaps in a way that is a bit more sustainable into the longer term and in a way that's certainly seen by some parts of the community as more acceptable, is really quite invigorating and motivates me every day to come to work to do that. So yeah, it's certainly a key part of the reason why I'm here today.
I think the first time, Damien, you and I met was when I came down to do a piece on the club's new outdoor undercover bowling green. So it is a very proud and a very strong bowling club. Club Sapphire always has been and I'm sure always will be. How important is bowling to Club Sapphire in 2026?
Oh, it's still a very important part of what we do here, and we really do respect and honour the traditions of this club. This club was created and the charter that is listed and primary purpose that's listed in the Constitution is still the same as it was 20 years ago, and that is that the club was created to promote, fund, develop the game of bowls and other sports that the board might choose to adopt from time to time. So even from a political and legal perspective, it's still a really important part of what we do. But the club, as you said, has a proud history. We've got some really strong results, really good results at state level and national level in recent times. And the creation of the synthetic covered bowling facilities was really a twofold agenda, if you like. It was the club had 4 traditional grass greens, and the demand for them had declined to the extent that we thought, probably 2 that were more weather resistant would be all that we would need going forward. That would do a few things. It frees up land for other potential income developing strategies, but it also allowed us to modernise the whole feel and look of the sport. So when you walk into the club these days, you enter, those who come from the northern side of the club will walk between the 2 synthetic bowling greens with the roof over. And it has a great atmosphere. It really presents the sport in a really modern, professional and fun light. So if you came to the club this afternoon, you'd see either side of the entrance as you walk in, the covered greens covered in barefoot bowlers, and it's more singlets and board shorts that you'll see this afternoon than whites. Not that you see them whites anymore. I think it provides a great image for the sport, but it's also a great revenue generator for the club. We really tried in moving to the synthetic covered greens to create a facility that was world-class as far as competition goes, but also more around the image of the whole sport, and something that we're very proud of, and something that turns the sport to some extent, and this, I don't mean this to sound critical, but you could argue that it was a bit of a ball and chain from a cost perspective. So our agenda was to turn it from that into a genuine income generating side of our business, and it really is today. The barefoot bowlers, there'll be 150 bowlers on the green this afternoon, all paying green fees, all having a drink, having a bit of fun, and adding a great atmosphere and image to this club as people enter to buy their dinner tonight.
One of those decommissioned bowling greens has been turned into a community garden. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was one of the challenges we had. The 2 redundant bowling greens, we don't have any great need for them today for any other purpose, and we decided that one of those greens could be repositioned and repurposed as a community garden, and we've got a community group that is responsible for maintaining it, but the club provides 1 bowling green, all the water, any power that's required, and just some other funding to this community group. So they've created a 1,200 square metre community garden on what was Green 4. And our kitchens have the pick of the gardens. So if there's anything particular that chefs want for specials or the like, they'll wander out and have their pick from what's seasonal. The volunteers also are able to take some of the vegetables home, and the community group then sells some at farm gate sales. On a Sunday morning, you can wander onto that green and buy fresh organic vegetables. And then whatever's left over each week goes to a community pantry that is situated just across the road from the club and goes to great purpose there. So it really has been a good initiative and a great image for the club. It's created another reason for people to visit our site, and I think a bit of an image changer. It might only be a 1%, but it's all about, this is another thing that the club industry does for the community and provide that beautiful space and for that purpose. So it's a great look and it's a great thing. And I know our chefs love it too, to be able to walk out there and get some inspiration.
Amalgamations are a hot topic across the state at this point in time, particularly post-COVID. We've seen a couple on the South Coast in recent years, and there may be more to come. Club Sapphire's had some experience with amalgamations and attempted amalgamations in your 20 years down on the far South Coast. Tell us about that experience, because there have been a few frustrations in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had an interesting history, I think. Back in 2002, the Merimbula Imlay Bowling Club and True Beach Country Club amalgamated. And then in 2012, we de-amalgamated. So I started here in late 2006. The reason for the de-amalgamation was that the 2 groups of members that had approved the amalgamation in 2002 had different understandings of what had been committed or guaranteed would happen in the future. So those that were members of the True Beach Country Club, largely golfers, had believed that they would get equal voting rights after several years, and the bowlers, who were largely from Merimbula Imlay Bowling Club, believed that there'd never ever be a change to the voting rights, and that bowlers would always be the controlling membership, if you like, and control the constitution. And ultimately that misunderstanding between the 2 groups led to some disharmony, quite a few political challenges, and to be frank, there was a fair bit of infighting that was starting to I think, take the eye off the ball here, and it was really about instead of looking internally, we needed to look externally where our real competitors were. So in 2012, the board decided to put a proposal to the two groups of members, that the two entities separate, and it was actually, I think, a very good outcome for both entities. So I think it was amalgamation in 2002, de-amalgamation in 2012. And the other point I should make around the de-amalgamation, at that point in time, the amalgamation laws allowed for the forfeiture on transfer of poker machine licence to not apply when it came to an amalgamation. And the stamp duty didn't apply on the transfer of assets in an amalgamation, but it didn't allow for those two things in the situation where the club's de-amalgamated. So at that point, despite having all the ducks lined up to make this thing happen, the big challenge beyond the membership challenge was that financially it wasn't a great scenario because of the likelihood of forfeiture and stamp duty. And Clubs New South Wales at that time got bipartisan support to have the legislation amended to include the forfeiture not applying in the situation of de-amalgamation, and eventually stamp duty not applying in de-amalgamation. And that support from Clubs New South Wales really made that concept viable. So interesting time. Fast forward to about 2015, and Merimbula Imlay Bowling Club, or Club Sapphire as it was then trading, and the Merimbula RSL had discussions, the boards did, around the prospect of amalgamating those two entities. And it was largely based on the predictions that the overall gaming revenue for this area was in decline and would continue to decline. And if you put on a graph the rate of decline and projected that forward, at some point in the future, there wouldn't be enough business for those two clubs to continue to operate. So we sought to amalgamate the two major clubs in Merimbula at that point. Unfortunately, it didn't get past the first vote. The first vote was at the Merimbula RSL, and it had to be approved by Merimbula RSL members. The concept was a marriage of equals, but the way the legislation was worded at the time could be interpreted that it wasn't a marriage of equals. But I still believe it was a great loss for this town. It would have been a magnificent entity to put these two clubs together. But ultimately, the members decided it wasn't going to happen, and we've done our best with that since. And it probably has meant that the four clubs that operated in this area, immediate area, have not operated as well as they perhaps would have had there only been three. And I think perhaps the Pembula Merimbula Golf Club was the one who suffered the most. As the gaming pie started to shrink and we all fought harder for our market share, the Pembula Merimbula Golf Club was not in a position to do as well as the others. And it today has still got a magnificent golf course, but no clubhouse and no gaming machines. It was a lesson to me, particularly in ego and politics. And if you don't massage them both well, you won't get any of these things through.
Well, for people who haven't been to Merimbula before, the distance between Club Sapphire and the RSL, less than a couple of 100 metres away, Pambula Merimbula Golf Club, over the other side of town, but still in a pretty close proximity to the other two. At some point in the future, surely it's better to retain all three community assets under the one umbrella than to have them necessarily trying their luck alone. Do you think there might be a prospect in the future that at least two or possibly all three of the clubs might come together under the one umbrella?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to think it would happen at the decision of the clubs, not being forced to do so because of market conditions. But I think there's some great synergies and great efficiencies that would come from putting the three together, and with the agenda to retain the assets for the community and just reducing the overheads, etc. I do think it'll happen, but I do hope that when it happens, it's because of by choice, not by necessity.
Damien, you know firsthand that we often see the very best of the club industry in great circumstances of adversity, such as the 2020 bushfires over that summer period. Club Sapphire played an enormous role helping members of the local community back in 2020 as an evacuation centre. Some of the scenes that came out of your club during those days stick in the memory forever. Tell us about that time. I know you're very proud of the role the club played then. Tell us about those days.
Yeah, that was a very challenging but rewarding time. It was a horrific time for this community, or for large parts of New South Wales and beyond the state. And it was around about this time 6 years ago that this happened. The bushfires surrounded our area, and Merimbula was relatively safe. So areas south and west and north of here were under significant attack from fires, but Merimbula was a little bit removed from that. It was probably 30 kilometres from a really serious fire. So Merimbula became one of the destinations for evacuees, and we had roughly a week where this club was shut and operated as the evacuation centre, the main evacuation centre in Merimbula. And we had, during that time, there was probably 3 or 4 days where it was at its peak, and we had approximately 1,500 people in the club at that point, and 1,200 of them were sleeping here overnight as evacuees. They'd left their homes in horrific circumstances, some of them, and arrived here 24 hours a day looking for refuge. And it was a wonderful example of just what the community can do in situations like this. We had community groups just turn up from everywhere to support us and help us. Every room in the club had people in it. We provided 3 meals a day for everyone. The gyms, showers became the bathrooms, and shower facilities for the people staying here. But some of the corporates in the area really blew me away as well. Woolworths, for instance, which is next door to us, just opened their doors and said, come and help yourself to whatever you need. And the local doctors, at one point, the roads and the airport were closed, and the doctors set up a medical clinic in the club because St John's couldn't get through. And there were people that were arriving in the club with breathing difficulties and burns and other health challenges that they would have had at home. But obviously when they had to leave their home, it was more difficult for them. So the doctors set up a 24-hour clinic in the club and dealt with that. The doctors who live in this town just turned up, and it was just magnificent. We had one room in the club became, to some extent, a dementia ward. We had one of the nursing homes in the area had to evacuate, and there was 20 to 30 of their patients delivered to the club, and we just had to find a way to deal with it. So they went into one room. We were able to get donated beds, mattresses, air beds, whatever we could to put people on. And in that room for about 4 days, it was basically a dementia ward. And we had volunteers turn up who had some knowledge of nursing who just stepped in and helped make that happen. It was a real challenge for those people that were in that room because obviously, they had their own challenges back in the nursing home, let alone in a place that was unfamiliar and that was as busy and congested as this place was. It was just a magnificent example of what the community can do and what the club industry did. And I think we saw the club industry at its absolute best at that point. And, if we ever wanted to send a message to the community about what this industry does for the community, that was a great example of it. People came here, they felt safe, they were well looked after. We actually had a bit of trouble getting some to leave because schnitzel and chips 3 meals a day appealed to some people. And we were very lucky that we'd stocked up big time, ready for the Christmas period. So we had lots of food on board. But the wonderful thing, a lot of our staff couldn't leave their homes because they were under threat as well. So those staff that could turn up just turned up and helped. It was very stressful. I stayed in the club for the whole time. My house was, I had to leave my place as well. To be here and be part of it was, one of the things I'm proudest of, I suppose, being part of this community and seeing what this club does.
Speaking of proudest moments, I suppose it's an appropriate time to reflect on your achievements, given you're about to celebrate your 20th year at Club Sapphire. Take us through some of your reflections on your time there and perhaps some of your biggest achievements and proudest moments. You just touched on the role played during the Black Summer bushfires. What else are you most going to remember?
There's so many things that come to mind, and we've touched on most of them already. The evacuation centre role is the standout in my mind, not only because I saw just what this industry could do, but it was something that we couldn't plan for. It happened almost out of nowhere, and it just all fell in place. And I felt that was probably is the proudest moment that I've had in this club. I think the de-amalgamation was a really important thing for me. It was a massive challenge to get that through and have both membership groups vote in favour of it. That was a very proud moment. There's some little things too that sort of fly under the radar a bit. When we wanted to convert the grass greens to synthetic greens, we were told that bowling members at a club wouldn't support getting rid of 4 traditional grass greens and reopening with 2 synthetic. That was almost unanimously supported, and I was very proud of that moment that we were able to communicate and articulate to the membership the importance of that decision for the club, and they embraced it and still do today. So that, whilst it's a relatively small achievement in the scheme of things of this club, I felt really proud of that. And I think probably the thing that makes me turn up for work most days is still probably the thing that, or one of the things that I'm most proud of, and that's the fact that this club has a genuine desire to do the right thing by the community in every decision. It has a genuine desire to reposition our business model to make us more contemporary and less reliant on some of the traditional products that some of the community don't support the way they once did. So there's probably a variety of those things that have been really proud moments for me. I'd like to think there's many more to come, but we'll wait and see about that. But it's been a really interesting journey. I think, something that probably is a little bit, I forget about sometimes, is I came to this industry with what I thought was a knowledge of running a business. I had an MBA. I'd been a CEO for 9 years in another industry. I came here thinking, I'll pick this up pretty quick. But it was a big challenge those first few years, getting my head around the culture and the differences between the customers in the two industries. So it's something I was proud of, that I was able to shift from one industry to another and eventually get my head around it. Yeah, I could probably go on about it for a lot longer than needs to be, but there's a lot of moments that are very proud, or I feel very proud about in my 20 years.
You're pretty unique in the club industry, Damien, in that you've only ever been at the one club. Club Sapphire is your sole club appointment. Did you ever think about going anywhere else? Would you ever go anywhere else?
Not now. I love this, and I love the challenge of repositioning this business model. No, I didn't. Not in clubland. I've had in recent years quite a few opportunities to move back into horse racing, but I've resisted that and stayed here. And I'm very fortunate. I live in a beautiful part of the world. I work for a wonderful board that my values and theirs are aligned. We have a great team of people here who genuinely want to see the place survive and thrive and do the right thing by not only their customers, but the broader community. I haven't been serious about moving, but I have had a look a couple of times. But no, I think I'm here for as long as they'll have me is probably the best way to put it.
Now, Damien, what do you enjoy doing away from work?
Well, horse racing is probably my greatest passion, my hobby. I love attending a good race meeting. I love a real country race meeting that's very basic. The Bombalas, the Coombers, the once-a-year tracks, where it still really is the basis of what racing was formed on, and that is the community coming together. And those rural communities, it's such a special day. You go to a Gundagai Snake Gully Cup, and it's basically a back to Gundagai weekend, and the atmosphere in those towns and the way the towns get behind those race meetings, I love that. So I love going to those things. As I mentioned earlier, I've still got shares in a few horses that some days please me, but more often than not don't. But that's something I love doing. I love the characters in horse racing. It's probably something I miss a little bit. The trainers, the jockeys, and the colourful characters, as they call them. I love reading about that. I like keeping fit. We've got a great gym here at the club. I love going there and still do a bit of running and other forms of exercise. I love the beach. There's lots of things to do here. I'm very fortunate. I have a beautiful wife, and we love walking together, and we're planning a few fairly significant walks in the future. We're hoping to do the Camino in Spain. Jackie, my wife's done that a couple of times already from different locations or on different routes. So we're hoping to do that. But remaining healthy is probably a prime objective. And I've got 3 daughters who are grown up, and I like or love going to see them and staying in touch with what they're doing. And yeah, I'm very fortunate. I feel like I've had lots of balls bounce my way in my life.
A few better places in the world than Merimbula for that kind of outdoor lifestyle that you've described there. We better get a name of one of your most promising nags, because we do have a lot of racing enthusiasts listening to the podcast. Can you give us 1 or 2 names that we can keep an eye out for in the form guides?
Oh, well, that's an interesting choice. There's one particular horse I really like called Ain't Seen Mars. He's only a maiden, or he's only had 3 starts. He's still learning what it's all about, but I think he's got a future. But there's nothing like the optimism that a horse owner has. But,
exactly. Well, we'll mark that name down. Ain't Seen Mars. All right. We've had some pretty interesting films nominated by CEOs and directors around the state when it comes to the question of what is your favourite film. You've got an absolute belter for us. What's your favourite film or documentary?
When you asked me that question earlier, I thought there's one that just blows me away every time I think about it, and I've watched it several times now, and it's called The Sunny Boy. I don't know if people will know it, but it's a documentary that was on ABC several years ago, and it was a documentary about a guy that was a childhood hero of mine, who was the lead singer in my favourite band of that era when I was about 18 or 19, called the Sunny Boys. And his name's Jeremy Oxley, and it's a great story about Jeremy. And Jeremy, unfortunately, was diagnosed with schizophrenia and disappeared from the stage, and made a comeback a few years ago now. And yeah, it's a great story and inspirational. And once again, it's another story about tenacity and hanging in there and doing the best with what you've got.
It is a wonderful Australian documentary. It used to be on the ABC iView. I'm not sure where people can see it now, but by all means, try and seek it out, The Sunny Boy. Couple of questions, Damien, before we go. What do you see as some of the long-term challenges facing the industry? You've been around for a while now. What do you see as the looming challenges to clubs over the next 10 to 20 years?
I think it's still really about, nothing has changed in my time, and it was exactly the same challenge, but with a different name when I worked in horse racing, and that's that we rely heavily on products for our revenue that community today doesn't perhaps embrace as well as they once did, or to the extent they once did. So I think our biggest challenge is repositioning the business model in a way that allows us to still do what we do well, and that's the right thing by the community. And I think it's a big challenge. It's to the extent that we can't lose sight of our current business and the wonderful business model that we already have. And we have to keep looking after that, promoting that. So that, I think, is the challenge, looking after the existing business whilst positioning for the future. That's certainly what a lot of my time's consumed with, and the thing that keeps me awake at night often. It's very doable, but we just need support of the entities that control that a little bit, such as government, to help us make that happen.
And Damien, to close, why do you think registered clubs will still be around in 100 years' time?
I think they'll be around, and I think it's because we recognise community need really well, and the club industry fills that void really well. What community need dominates in 10, 20, 30, 50 or 100 years' time, I don't know, but I do know that clubs are really good at adapting and meeting that need, and I think as long as we keep focusing on that and finding ways to fund it, we'll still be here.
Well, Damien, thanks so much for your time on the Club Life podcast. A very early congratulations on your looming milestone, the 20 years in the job. Well done on all your achievements, and good luck for the future. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks very much, Darren.
Damien Foley there, the CEO of Club Sapphire. And that's all we have time for on today's episode of the Club Life podcast. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast channel so you're alerted whenever a new episode drops. Search Club Life Podcast wherever you consume your podcast and hit subscribe. If you have a suggestion on who might make an interesting future guest, get in touch with the team by emailing clublife@clubsnsw.com.au. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.